Welcome to the Knakal News Network. Knakal News Network is brought to you by Massey Knakal Realty Services, New York's #1 building sales firm.
Hi, I'm Jon Hageman, Sales Team Manager for Massey Knakal. Welcome to the Knakal News Network. Today I'm here with Bob Knakal, Chairman of Massey Knakal, and we're here to talk about the recent rent guidelines ruling and its impact on the multifamily market. Bob, the Rent Guidelines Board just came out last week with historically low increases. What are the ramifications for that on the housing market?
The multifamily sector is the portion of the market that has always been in highest demand. Investors love multifamily properties. There are more multifamily properties in New York City than any other type of building. And because of rent regulation, the Rent Guidelines Board was formed to create a mechanism by which increases in regulated rents would be established. And those increases are supposed to keep pace with the costs and expenses of running those properties.
So over the years, has that typically occurred?
Well, they have to some degree and haven't to other degrees. I think if we look at the basket of expenses that the Rent Guidelines Board is supposed to take into consideration, this is a basket of expenses that was created in 1984 and has not been updated. Things like removing asbestos, which wasn't required in 1984. Things like abating lead paint, putting window guards in, and the hundreds of other things that are required for owners to do. None of the costs of those are baked into what these increases are supposed to be. So if you look at the rent increases that have been granted, they really have not kept pace with the way expenses have risen.
But Bob, isn't it important to have low increases to maintain affordability?
Well, Hags, now you're sounding like a politician. You know, the affordability thing is something that every politician will point to. And they say we need affordable housing, and the city does need affordable housing. It's really important that we provide workforce housing for the folks that make this city run. If you talk about affordability, yes, we need affordable housing, but rent regulation is not any type of affordable housing program. It is an inertia program. The longer you stay in the apartment, the longer you're able to stay in the apartment. And so I think that that's a fallacy that is thought of about rent regulation.
So what specifically about this recent guidelines ruling?
The Rent Guidelines Board approved the lowest increases in history. 1% for a one-year lease and 2.75% for a two-year lease. These are historically very, very low, and the reason that the tenant advocates and the tenants are upset about this historically low number is that the mayor was pledging to enact a 0% increase or a rent freeze on one-year rents. And this was something that I guess made good political theater, but is something that ultimately even folks who were appointed by the mayor felt that their conscience wouldn't allow them to go with 0.
And why is that the case, Bob? Explain that a little bit more.
Well, it impacts a couple of things. It impacts the maintenance of buildings, and it impacts the desirability from the investor's point of view. I'll talk about the first issue. It really goes back to the 1970s when you saw the World Series being covered and pictures off in the distance of buildings that were burning, and Howard Cosell famously saying the Bronx is burning. I think that one of the things that the city did that really helped regenerate a lot of neighborhoods was create incentive for the private sector to invest equity in increasing the quality of the housing stock. Now, with increases that don't keep pace with inflation, it's providing less money for property owners to upgrade their buildings, to keep repairs up to date. And when you create a motivation to invest less in the housing stock, the quality of that housing stock is going to deteriorate. So from that perspective, I think it was a very bad decision. In summary, the Rent Guidelines Board passed historically low rent increases. Unfortunately, these increases will not keep pace with the rapidly rising expense burdens within these buildings. The net effect of this could be a reduction in private sector investment in the multifamily sector and could lead to a deterioration of the quality of the housing stock.
Thank you for joining us today. Tune in next week for another installment on the Knakal News Network.